Good morning, everybody. Senator Rob Stafsholt is joining me for a casual chat today, Thursday, August 26th, 2021. A special thank you to all of our guests that have been on this month. And if you've missed any of those, you can find a recording on our Facebook page, on our video tab, or just go to YouTube and search DrydenWire. All of our videos are on there. Well, sans one video. Thank you, Adam. That is no longer on YouTube. But today I'm chatting with Rob Stafsholt from Wisconsin's 10th Senate District. Mr. Rob, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Ben. I'm doing well. Thanks for having us on today, and we'll have a little chat here about some of the things going on in our area.
Nice. So the last time, well, actually this morning when I was driving here, I was actually thinking, when did you and I first start talking? Now, it's only like a 6-block drive, so I didn't have a long time to actually think about it. And I can't remember when you and I first started chatting. It was a few years ago, but I can't remember where or when or how. Do you remember?
I don't. I remember you and I had a long phone call one time about some issues and some things on the show, but I think that was well before I was ever even on the show. So I don't honestly remember how long it's been, but it's been a couple years of blissful contact with the DrydenWire.
Blissful. I like that. We're going to use that. So there's a lot of things I want to get to, but really the area, things that are happening in your district, and of course things are happening down in Madison. It just seems like there's a lot of things obviously always going on there. So we could probably talk for hours just about the stuff that's happening in Madison. But first, just to kind of catch some people up that don't know you very well or not from your area and therefore don't know you very well. You have been in Madison now. This would be, you're in your fifth year, right?
Year 5, yep.
Year 5. So you were you're the assembly in that'd be the 29th Assembly District.
Yep.
And you ran, so that was several years ago, and you won that election. Then obviously it's every 2 years. You run, you win again. Then you decided to run for Senate, and that was the last time you were on a year ago. You were running for that. And if I recall, that's one of those things, since it's every 2 years for an assembly person, you were running, and if you lost, then it's not like you can go back to being in the assembly. You're finished. So
yeah, no, I won my first election in 2016 to start being a state representative in the assembly in 2017. Those are 2-year terms. I did two-year terms and then chose to run for state senate. And it's, once in a while there's a special election, so you kind of get a free swing, but mine was not. So I had to give up my seat in order to run for that and kind of go big or go home. If I lost, I was out. So
yeah, I mean, that's got to be a little, I mean, now that you won, looking back, where you're like, holy, were you actually, I wouldn't say nervous, but I like doing this. And boy, if I don't win this election, I don't know what I'm going to do now, because I really enjoy doing this. Was there hesitation or trepidation?
There was a little bit of that, as far as I felt like I had more things that I wanted to do and more things to accomplish for my constituents. And had I lost, I wouldn't have the opportunity to do those, where if I would have just stayed in an assembly seat where respectfully, relatively, likely that I would have kept that seat for a while, I still could work on those. But I expanded my district to the Senate, which is about 3 times as big. Part of it was I have a really great staff down in Madison, and Charlene was with me in the assembly. And, really, if I lose, she's out of a job too. So that weighed in a little bit too. And we just gave it our all. We committed 100%, and we ran through and we're fortunate enough to win that election.
So now that you've been in the Senate since, January, right? January this year. It's a relatively short amount of time, but what have you noticed from, let's say, from a procedural standpoint? Because I don't know how this stuff works. From the Assembly to the Senate, are there different rules? Are there different, when I was in the Senate, we used to do it this way, and now we're in this, or when I was in the Assembly, and now I'm in the Senate. Now it's all, from a procedural standpoint, is there much difference between the Assembly and the Senate?
So functionally, as a taxpayer, we effectively do the same job. As a legislator, your job is to write bills, then create them and pass them into laws. But to answer your question, it is a little bit different. In the Assembly, there's 99 members between the two sides of the aisle. Currently, the Republicans have about a 2/3 majority of that, slightly less than 2/3. So in your own Republican caucus, there's just a lot of people. There's a lot of voices, and and it requires some additional organization to keep all that flowing. The Senate, there's only 33 senators in the state, so the Republicans have about 21 of those seats. So in my caucus, there's 20 people. So it's easier to get your voice heard, but it's a little bit looser in the discussions and the pathway in which we go. So it's from a strategic standpoint on how to get my bill passed to benefit my constituents. It's a little bit different process. It just takes a little bit different approach.
What would you attribute that to? You said it's a little more. I can't remember the word you used. You're casual. It's a little more. It's different. These when you sit down with this caucus versus the caucus that you were that you were part of with the assembly. What would you attribute that to? Just the sheer number that there's fewer people?
Yeah, that's one. I think in the assembly there's just that many more people, so it requires a little more day-to-day organization of how everybody gets their stuff kind of going through the process. But number two, as a senator, so my assembly district was District 29. Mm-hmm. My Senate district encompasses 3 assembly districts. So I get 29, 28, and 30. Mm-hmm. So, just by nature, a Senate district, you have a wider variety and a slightly broader demographic of people. Somebody that lives up in Webster, Wisconsin in my district maybe has a little different perspective as to what I should be working on than someone that lives in downtown Hudson. It's just, it's different where the assembly district's a little smaller and you still get a variety because you have rural folks. And, my assembly district, I had the city of Menominee of 16,000 people, and I had Boyceville, and I had little places like Emerald. So there's a variety, but they all live within 20, 25 miles of each other. Where in the Senate, somebody in Webster thinks differently sometimes than folks in Hudson. So it's a little bit broader.
Yeah. And who are in the assembly in your districts? That's 28, says Gabe Magnifici, Clint Moses, and is it Shannon?
Shannon Zimmerman. Zimmerman. Those are my 3 assembly folks.
So you're a Republican in the 10th district, and you have 3 Republicans in the assembly in your district. Does that help? I don't know how that really works. It just would seem like if you're a Republican senator and all 3 are Republicans, or vice versa, if it's Democrats, that's the same thing. But you have them all. What kind of benefits are there from that?
So it's maybe not any easier to get laws passed or bills passed into law, because currently we have a divided government. Our Governor Evers is a Democrat, and we have Republican Senate, Republican Assembly. That being said, I think if you have all Republican Assembly people and a Republican senator in our district, sometimes it's easier to get our voice heard for our constituents that we represent in our area in Madison within our own caucus, versus if you had somebody that wasn't even a part of that caucus on the other side, they might have a different political view. And it just seems like it's easier to get our voice heard. And I'll tell you, in a very bipartisan manner, everybody hears about the Republican versus Democrat demographic in the state, but in Madison, there's a very significant split between urban, suburban, and then the rural folks. So in a bipartisan way, most of the people in northern Wisconsin on both sides of the aisle, we fight pretty regularly and oftentimes together to try to get things for northern Wisconsin, because just by population density, there's far more representatives and senators in the southeast part of the state. So their voices get heard better. And it's hard sometimes to get our fair share up here in the Northwoods.
Yeah. And we've always talked about that. Every show and every politician, whether it's we've had Janet Bewley on, which, by the way, so that last time she was supposed to be on, internet went out. I think she's now rescheduled for middle or end of September. So she'll be on. Oh, I do want to ask you about her then. We'll get to that in a little bit. So right now, what is kind of going on? What are the main things that you guys are talking about down in Madison right now?
Sure. Well, let's back up just a little bit. When we jump into a new session, and they're 2-year sessions, the very first thing we do in January is we start into the budget process, which is this huge undertaking. I remember as a freshman assembly person, you kind of want to get your feet wet, and there's no choice for that. You jump full-fledged into the deep end. You're doing an $80 billion biennium budget for the state. So we jump into that, and that's what happened again this year in January. The governor put out his proposal. The legislature's job is to review that and either rewrite or tweak or change. And we went through that whole process. And, I'm sure there's things in there that not everybody loves. There's things in there hopefully everybody does agree with. we did some good things. We got that passed a month or two here ago. So that kind of sucks the air out of the room, if you will, for the first 4 or 5 months. And now we're kind of back on track with the budget's done. So we're doing our regular bills. They're going through the committee process. People are drafting them. Most of us are spending a lot of time. I've been spending a lot of time back in the district meeting with constituents and different associations, local government folks, talking about issues that are important, and then taking those to Madison to draft bills and hopefully try to get those through committees and onto the floor so we can vote on them.
Sure. And is there anything in particular right now that you are either working on, or when you go out and you meet your constituents and you're sitting down and you're getting their feedback, that you want to make sure you address sooner rather than later?
Sure. I think the elephant in the room, in every room I've been in for the last 6 months, is election integrity.
Yeah, you're going to have to walk me through that, because I saw something, I think it was Robin Voss yesterday put something, and I'm like, well, but I thought we were finished with, I don't really know where we are.
Sure.
I keep seeing all these things. I'm like, the election's over. What are we doing? I don't get it. So whether it's now or in a little bit, kind of walk me through why we're even still talking about this.
Yep. So I've authored a couple of election integrity bills, and when you say the word election integrity, it's kind of a trigger term for both sides of the aisle, and it really shouldn't be. Integrity is something that I think we hope we have in government on every subject, but let's just back up a little bit. I think last November's election left a lot of people questioning the process, and I think that's fair, and I think we should question the process from time to time. I think both the Assembly and the Senate work together on many things, and we're kind of in step, but at the same time, I would say that the Assembly took more of a reactive approach, looking at investigating any allegations of wrongdoing during the election process. They're doing the investigations, trying to figure out what happened. And the Senate, and including myself, we've took a little bit more proactive, looking forward to the next election, saying, okay, well, if there were problems and we find out there were, or we don't find out there were, what are things we can do to make sure that we guarantee that our elections are fair, they're accurate, and they have integrity? And so I'm one of the folks in the Senate that has been working on some of those bills. I have a bill right now that's called a Monday bill. What the Monday bill would do is it allows to canvass absentee ballots on the Monday before the Tuesday election. Now, it scares me because I was a little worried about tabulating those and putting the results out and figuring out who got how many votes and that. But the term canvass means they actually process the paper ballot. They go through to make sure it's a legal ballot. It's signed where it needs to be signed. It's stamped where it needs to be stamped. And they enter it into the machine so that it's in there. What that does, and the goal for that bill would then be so that on Tuesday, whether it's a perception that we need to eliminate or it's actually happening, you hear about the midnight ballot dump that everybody talks about, and all of a sudden at midnight or 2 a.m., 40,000 votes came in, and they're all for one side or the other, and people are concerned about that. Yeah. And if it's a perception that's not true, this would eliminate that, because if we process those the days before, they'd already be in the process during the day on Tuesday, so that wouldn't happen at midnight. It would eliminate either the potential for wrongdoing or the perception that there is wrongdoing going on. And I just think that's a cleaner way to do it. That's one of the bills we're working on. The other bill that I authored, which is kind of a little bit in election integrity, but it basically would move the presidential primary in Wisconsin to a different day than the spring elections. My purpose in that is the most partisan election in the entire world is the United States presidential primary. And whether it's a Democrat primary, if we have a Republican president and the Democrats are having a primary to see who their presidential candidate is going to be, you get waves of Democrats out, and it really makes all the local elections skewed one way or the other. And it's completely true that other way too. If we have a Democrat president and the Republicans are sending out their presidential primary that day, whoever local Democrats are on those spring elections, there's a wave of Republicans, and it makes it somewhat of an unfair election, I think. So I would just like to see the most partisan election in the entire world moved on a day that doesn't have supposedly nonpartisan elections on it. I just think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. A couple questions on that. Cost. Having it on a separate day, Obviously, it's just going to cost more.
It would.
And do you have a ballpark number? If you're working on that, I'm sure somebody has kind of already, give me a ballpark of what that would actually cost the state to have that on a second, or maybe you haven't gotten that far in the bill yet.
We've kind of gotten that far. I don't have that number exactly
Okay.
locked down, and I don't actually have it in front of me here today. But
Okay.
to answer your questions, and the criticism is that that's going to be one more election. It's going to be one more cost.
Yeah.
And where I live in Aaron Prairie Township is a small little township, and those things matter. And I am
Yeah.
conscious of that. I am aware of it. But you try to weigh out the good versus the pros and the cons of everything. And I just believe that having the most partisan election in the entire world on a day with another election is just not the right thing to do.
Is this so far getting any bipartisan traction, or is this kind of more of a Republicans want this, but because that's kind of how it goes, right? Any of the bigger things, well, if Republicans like it, then if I'm a Democrat, then therefore I don't like it, or vice versa. I know that's not true all the time, but let's face it, that just kind of happens.
Yep, that's part of the deal.
Yep. So is this getting any bipartisan traction?
I would say that particular bill has been a little bit quiet. So we have about, I think, 13 or 14 of what we call election integrity bills. My two bills are part of that package. Excuse me. And some of the more core ones have started going through the process. That's not necessarily one of them, because I think you could make an argument that it doesn't actually go towards the process of the election. It's more about a partisan versus nonpartisan election. So it hasn't really been included in the integrity portion of what we're working on. Some of those bills have gone through, and Governor Evers vetoed them. I think there was a package of 6 that had gone through and gotten to his desk, and he vetoed those a couple of weeks ago. So we're doing the best we can on election integrity, but those bills, the ones that are still out there, are trickling through, and the ones that got vetoed, the governor vetoed those, and people are aware of that.
I want to go back to that Monday bill. I love the name of that, because as soon as you said it's the Monday bill, I just thought it was the bill that will never get passed. Because it's like the Monday diet. I'll start Monday, right? Yeah, I'll start exercising on Monday. That's what I say every weekend. I really should go to the gym. You know what? I'll start Monday. It's a fresh week, and then I never do. Yep. So I got a funny feeling that one's never going to get passed. It's never going to get done just because of the name, the Monday bill.
We'll have to rename it.
Okay. All right. We'll have you, if it does get passed, you have to call me and we'll have to have you back on. Okay. So speaking of northern Wisconsin, and you had said that a lot of the representatives or the Senate, the legislators in northern Wisconsin, oftentimes, whether they're Republican or Democrat, they work together oftentimes for the benefit of northern Wisconsin. And honestly, I don't really care all about northern Wisconsin. I care about northwestern Wisconsin, northwest Wisconsin. True. You are now in the Senate, and the other senator, at least that is in our kind of coverage area, is Janet Bewley. Do you work? Again, I don't really know the ins and outs or how this stuff works for you. Sure. Do you have communications with her? Do you work with her on things, or is it, I'm every once in a while I see her walking around the hall or something, but we don't really communicate?
Yeah, so in full honesty, Janet is the minority leader in the Senate, so she has a pretty active role in actually running the Democrat side of the state Senate. I think that keeps her really busy. But that being said, if there are issues, and there were in the budget and some other things that I think are good for our area, or they run the line between our two districts, so it falls on both sides of it. There were some broadband issues, for instance, some stuff in the budget for broadband, and we contacted her office and said, hey, we're supporting this because it helps X, Y, and Z townships, and on the other side of the line, there's these 4 townships that you have. We work together in that. She looks at it and makes her own decision, and then in this case, she supported that as well. So, don't tell the media, because it's not real newsworthy if we're not arguing. But once in a while, we do work together, and it's not even once in a while, but regularly our offices are in contact back and forth. Nick Milroy's up in Superior on the Assembly side. His office and my office contact each other on a somewhat regular basis as well. And Nick's on the Assembly Sporting Heritage Committee, and I'm the chair in the Senate. So a lot of northwestern Wisconsin hunting, fishing, and trapping, and just outdoor recreation, parks. Nick's working on a veteran stuff that he's worked with on me. So, yeah, we do talk to each other. Most of us have each other's personal cell phones, and you get the call and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. What do you think? And sometimes it's, that's not for me. Or sometimes, yeah, we'll run that up the flagpole and my office will come out with something. So those contacts happen.
Yeah. And that's good to hear. Because I think a lot of people, they just assume everybody hates each other, right? If you have an R next to your name, you have to hate the person with a D. And I mean, like, literally hate them. And I don't think that's accurate. They have wildly different vision, or they all want, I think, the same thing for their constituents and to make it better and et cetera. They just have a different way that they want to get it accomplished, but they're still human beings. How can you hate somebody? But I think a lot of people think that.
Sure. It blows my mind. There's a state senator by the name of Lena Taylor, who is a African-American female senator, Democrat from like downtown part of Milwaukee. And her and I have conversations regularly. We're on a couple committees together. And I find that I disagree with her stance on lots of issues, but we have the conversation. Yeah. And literally, we don't have very much in common. But I respect that she represents her constituents and what they think. And they just think very differently from what a lot of my constituents think. And she respects that back. So it's interesting, the kind of conversations and the backgrounds that people have and develop those relationships. So it's pretty neat, really.
How's the governor doing?
From my perspective, there's plenty of room for improvement there.
Oh, that's a very, very positive way of saying that.
Yeah.
Opportunities for growth. Right.
Yeah. I think that the way that the unemployment insurance was handled during the pandemic was atrocious. We had, and poor Charlene and Shelby in my office, they take these calls from folks that haven't gotten an unemployment check for 17 weeks or 11 weeks or 20 some weeks. They're literally losing their house or they're losing their car and they're crying on the phone. And unfortunately, probably the most frustrating part about this job is the things that I don't have any control over. Unemployment insurance is one of those things because I would help every one of those people. However, the governor runs that agency. His secretary that he appoints runs that agency. And so I believe that they just absolutely failed in that regard. I think that once you figure out you are failing, then you make changes and you fix it. And I don't think that happened as well. I just think that there were a lot of things that many of us would have done differently. We would have pulled in extra help. We would have taken some of the other agencies, for instance, DNR staff, as a service agency that has a call center. Most of those folks were off. They were working from home. They weren't doing things during the shutdown. We could have taken some of those people, trained them if it took a week's worth of training, we could have trained them to answer those phone calls and process it. It just was atrocious the way that went down. And I think that people, as I'm out in the community and going to the local fairs and the county fairs and the local small town Fun Fest stuff, they bring that up. And there's people, I think, that maybe weren't very politically active, but they know that didn't go well.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. There's several people that I know that really don't follow politics very much. And it's not Governor Evers' fault. No matter what governor was in there, was going to obviously be our governor through the COVID and and everything that goes with that falls under that umbrella. And there is a lot of things that go under that umbrella. And it's, obviously it's difficult. I believe that he's doing what he thinks is best for the state, because I just can't imagine somebody who purposely would do something to hurt everyone in the state. So that must mean that's what he thinks is the best thing to do. So that's perfectly fine. I don't agree with some of it, but that's okay too. But there's a lot of people who, because of these situations, who don't follow politics, couldn't care less about politics, that these are directly impacting them. And they do actually now have an opinion about the governor, either good or bad, when they don't even, I haven't voted in 20 years. But you know what? I'm paying attention to this because this is directly impacting me in my business right now.
Right. Yep.
Interesting. And so he's announcing, and obviously I love coming up in September because September is typically when locally, regionally, and statewide, you start hearing people announcing for their candidacy or that they're likely to be running for whatever it is that they're running for. Obviously, it's like the worst kept secret in politics for the last year that Rebecca Clayfish will be announcing. I'd be shocked if that wasn't in September, but who knows? But I looked something up this morning, and you'll know exactly why I'm bringing this up. And I didn't ask you before the show because you'd say no. I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. I saw that the lieutenant governor is running for U.S. Senate, Mandela Barnes,
Mhm.
and I looked that up, and that's the first time a lieutenant governor isn't going to be on the ticket with an incumbent governor in Wisconsin since 1967. Because I'm like, that's
Okay.
usually not. I'm like, why would he be leaving? I don't know. So anyway, now there's going to be, man, I'm sorry, a that's going to be obviously a hot topic this year, not just the governor's race, but really the lieutenant governor's race. Have you heard of anyone that is going to be running for lieutenant governor on Republican or Democratic side?
Yeah, I guess I'm not positive who would be running on the Democratic side, but there are quite a few names being floated around on the lieutenant governor side, on the Republican side, and obviously one of the reasons you asked this question is my name is one of those names.
What?
Yeah, I have not made any decisions. I am humbly honored that some of the people that are urging me to do that are people who I admire and respect very much, both back home and in Madison. To be honest with you, when the first one called and said, "Hey, I think you should consider this," I basically said, "Shut up and get off my phone." I like
Right.
you're funny, right?
What? Right.
And then I kind of left it at that. And a week or so later, someone else who is really somebody in Madison that I respect the things they do and the directions they take. She called me and said kind of the same thing. And there's been quite a few phone calls, and it's an honor for me to receive those calls. I hadn't even thought about it. It wasn't anything that was on my radar at all until they started calling. I just think that I just got in the Senate. I'm happy being the senator. I really enjoy representing the constituents of the 10th Senate District. So what I
Yeah.
told the newspaper was my daughter just went to college last weekend. And of course, this came out 60 days ago, a couple months ago. And I told them that I was going to spend every minute with my daughter I could before she left. And I did that. And now I will roll over that topic and make some decisions
All
here coming up.
right. Because I got a call a few months ago from someone down in Madison. Because doing this job, I get to know people, and it's not the politicians themselves; it's the campaigns, and those people, the behind the scenes people that are the political people. And I
Yep.
got a call since obviously I'm up in Northwest Wisconsin. You're in Northwest Wisconsin, and said, "Hey, do you think Rob Stafsholt would consider running for lieutenant governor?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Call him. Why are you calling me? I have no clue."
Oh,
And
so it's your fault. That's where it came from.
and I didn't really think much of it. But then it was a couple weeks later, someone else had called and asked if you would consider. I'm like, okay, that's weird. And then I had another call like a few days later. I'm like,
Yep.
okay, what is going on? Because these are some players that if they're asking, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And
And
that
then
was the last I heard. So then I Googled your name because I'm like, I don't know, maybe he's announced already. And I saw like on a Wisp Politics article, your name was brought up in there. And I'm like, oh, maybe he is. So, and I hadn't talked to you since all of this stuff happened until 2 days ago or 2 or 3 days ago.
yep.
And that's, we were having that conversation. I'm like, okay, are you actually going to be doing this or not? I've heard of some other names. They're not announced yet, so that'd probably be inappropriate to bring that up. But I don't know. I can tell you this: Northwest Wisconsin representation. I'm all for it. So I'm
Yep.
I'm all in if you're going.
Yeah. And like I say, I'm very humbly honored that those people made those phone calls and would think of me in that regard. And it to be completely honest, it took me off guard. I hadn't even thought of that, so it's taken me a little while to
Sure.
process that. And I think you and I talked the other day. That is a huge commitment, and I made a huge commitment last year to run for Senate, and that it requires changes in your personal life and the things you do at home and family time and my dad and I still run a farm here south between Richmond and Hammond, and I had to kind of make sure that other people covered my high end in a tractor seat while I was busy doing those things. And I kind of thought I was past that phase. And in order to run for lieutenant governor,
Yeah.
obviously that is
Yeah,
110%
you got to be
commitment.
all in, right?
Yeah.
You just
And
can't.
so that's my thought process is I need to decide whether or not that's something I want to
Yeah,
do and whether or not I think I'm the right person for that
sure.
position too, as well. So
Okay.
we're in the process of that, but zero commitments so far.
Okay. We have two questions here, so we'll wrap up with those. One was from Adam Jarkow, but before that, Adam. But first, can you see this on the screen?
Ben's a frequent flyer. Yep. Ben's
Yeah.
one of those guys, when you have a
Yeah.
conversation with Ben, it's hard to end.
So could you please sign on to, I don't know. Let me put it back up. I don't know why that keeps disappearing automatically.
Economic freedom must go. So Ben is probably the most determined person for legalizing
Yeah.
marijuana that I know.
I would agree with that, actually.
Yeah, and Ben doesn't necessarily take no for an answer. So when you tell him you're not on board yet, or you're not, he just continues right on to his propaganda on trying to get you on board. So to answer his question, and I've answered this to him in person, is I really respect a lot of our law enforcement, not a lot, but most of our law enforcement in the 10th Senate District. I have a working relationship with police chiefs and just boots on the ground officers, law enforcement officers, county sheriffs, deputies, a couple folks in the state patrol. And so when it comes to legalizing marijuana, my number one concern is if we did that, and we could debate the merits on that,
Sure.
I'm not going to be for that until we get to the point where those folks tell me we have a test that can test impairment if there's a traffic accident, no different than a breathalyzer or a blood test for alcohol. Because if somebody is using and they come down the road and smash into Ben Dryden and his wife and kids and kill somebody, I want to know whether or not we can hold them accountable. And until we have that test, I know Ben's going to say that there's tests out there now that work, but nobody has told me that any of those tests are admissible and will hold up in court. And until we have that, I'm just not ready to take that leap.
It's a non-starter, so it's not even about the merits of legalizing, etc. That's different. Until we
Nope.
have that, it's a non-starter for me. There's no point in talking about anything else until I know that we have that and admissible in court. Right?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Yeah, we already said we already do. Okay. So here's one from Adam. He said to ask you about this.
Yeah, Doc Preen is the chairman of the Natural Resources Board, and there's a big battle going on there now. Governor Evers appointed a new person to the NRB, and there is, and Adam knows the legalities of this perhaps better than I do, but basically, until the new person is confirmed, the existing chair has the opinion that they don't have to give up their chair. So he refuses to give up his seat. My understanding is there's legal precedence that's kind of the way it goes, because if nobody new is confirmed, then they can't take over that seat as well. So the controversy in this and how this became a political issue is it's not just that he's hanging around until somebody else gets confirmed and gets the seat. The deal is in Wisconsin, we have a wolf hunt that's coming up in November. It's mandated by state statute. And there's a bunch of folks that don't want that season to go on. Most of northwestern Wisconsin thinks it's the right thing to do. It's time to bring those population numbers back in check. And Doc Preen hung around, and they had a vote a couple weeks ago on setting the quota on how many wolves would be harvested in that season.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what made this controversial, the fact that he hung around for that vote, and they think that's the only reason he did it. I haven't talked to Doc. I don't know his motivations for that. I actually haven't talked to him since last January. We were on a meeting together, but I don't know where he's at on that. And now add to that, our Attorney General under Governor Evers, Josh Call, is suing Doc Preen on taxpayer dollars to try to get him removed. And my understanding is the folks in the legal world think that he will probably win in Dane County, and then we'll appeal it and appellate, and it'll end up in the state Supreme Court. So seems like a bit of a waste of time to me, but
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And Doc Preen would certainly be a good guest and could talk to that at length on all the issues going on, that far better than I could.
I wouldn't even know what to ask. I mean, he'd sure be a great guest, but I don't know any of that stuff. And I don't follow any of this stuff. I don't hunt because, as you probably know, I don't go outside often for pretty much anything.
Right. That's probably why you're hacking and coughing during the show.
Yeah,
You need to be outside. Next Monday, let's start that exercise plan next Monday.
My Monday bill. Yep. I love it.
Yep.
All right, man. Anything else going on that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to?
There's just a lot of stuff going on back home. Somebody asked me the other day what the most challenging part of being a state senator is, and it's really two things. And one of those is being back here in the district. there's just not enough time in the day. And I honestly feel like I failed a little bit if I don't get to every meeting that I get invited to, or every association, or the Lake Association's having issue up in Mud Hen Lake. And there's just, everybody has their meetings on the same day sometimes, and I just can't get everywhere.
Sure.
So I guess I just want to tell folks that if I didn't make it to whatever it was you invited me, it's absolutely not because I didn't care. It's just because I was probably at a different meeting somewhere else. And that's super frustrating to me. You can hear it in people's face when you have to tell them that sorry, I can't make it. I'm already committed somewhere else. And they kind of look at you and you're like, well, I feel bad. And we try to make it to the next one, but sometimes it's just not possible to be everywhere at the same time.
Yeah. What the second thing? You said there was two challenges.
The second thing is more in Madison and passing the bills, and it's a little bit of what I alluded to earlier, is doing a good job of representing northwestern Wisconsin in a building that highlights southeastern Wisconsin. That's frustrating to me. Trying to get bills passed and trying to get them signed by a governor who represents the people that elected him. He had a lot of votes in Milwaukee and Madison, and they are obviously a priority to them. My priority is right here in northwestern Wisconsin and always will be. So that's frustrating and difficult as well.
Wow. All right, last words. What's coming up for you? We're in August. What is next for you?
We've got some committee hearings coming up here in September, and we have some floor time, I think, in October scheduled. So trying to get some of these bills that help Wisconsin and help northwestern Wisconsin and local constituents, get those through committees in time to be on the floor, and then hopefully sell them in a way that Governor Evers will sign them into law. A lot of the bills that are getting to his desk are getting vetoed, but some are getting through. He's signed several of mine so far since we've been in office. So that's always nice to see, and I appreciate that.
Do you take those bills and get a printout of it and frame it and put it up in your office? Like, that was mine.
So the first one, as a state rep under Governor Walker, signed one. You get the little blue pen, and then we took it. Charlene in my office put it in a shadow box and hung it up in the office. And now my first one that Governor Evers did as well, we did the same thing. So.
Awesome. And are you finding yourself with your daughter gone now? Kind of, what do I do? I mean, I have lots to do, but it's got to be bizarre, right? I mean, I told one of my friends the other day that leaving her in a dorm room, I didn't realize that at the exact same moment in time, you could be that proud and that happy and completely sad at the same time. It was the weirdest feeling ever to feel that. And, I toughed it out in the dorm room as I left and gave her the hug and I love you. And her new roommate from Minnesota was there. They're going to school in North Dakota, and her parents were there. And so we toughed it out. And then the daughter asked me if I could take these big empty totes that she brought all her stuff out there with. I could bring them back home because she didn't want to have to keep them in her dorm room. And I had a 5-block walk back to my pickup by myself, carrying these empty totes, slumping down the road. And I won't tell you the sidewalk was dry the entire way. It was that was a long walk by myself, heading to the truck with all these empty totes and just leaving your girl that has moved on to the next chapter. It was a tough day. I'm literally getting emotional just picturing that and what that feeling is.
If we keep talking, I will too.
Yeah, we need to stop. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, I'm Ben Dryden, and you've been watching DrydenWire Live. Special thank you to my guest today, Senator Rob Stafsholt, and of course, thank you for watching. I'll see you next Tuesday for another episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. Until then, stay safe, stay positive, and as always, have a blessed day.